I, Paul Diffley, hereby call the Board of Education special meeting to order at 4 p.m. A quorum is present with all board members in attendance. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the public. I'd like to welcome all the community members in attendance this afternoon. It's nice to see you all giving up your free time. Oh, sorry. As a reminder, governing board meetings are a business meeting of the board held in public, and although public participation is encouraged, it is not the public's meeting. It is the duty of the board president and or clerk of the board to maintain an orderly, respectful, and peaceful meeting where all perspectives, voices, and opinions are welcome. Please refrain from speaking out while another person has the floor. Mr. Pardue, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the which stands under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for everybody.
Right. A3 is approval of the agenda, which calls for a motion and a second.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 5-0. A4, public comment regarding meeting agenda items. At this time, the governing board welcomes public comments. Pursuant to Education Code 35145.5, public comment at special board meetings may only be received concerning items posted on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the board are requested to complete a request to address the Board of Education card located at the entrance to the boardroom and submit it to the executive assistant to the superintendent and board. In accordance with bylaw 9323, individual speakers will be allowed up to 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda item. The board shall limit the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. We've received a total of 17 public comment cards, which adds up to 51 minutes regarding item B1 presentation and approval of proposed new AP US History curriculum. In accordance with Board Bylaw 9323, individuals will be allowed to speak up to 3 minutes to address the board. However, board, I would like to call for a motion and a second to adjust the total amount of time allowed for public input from 20 minutes to 51 minutes to provide the opportunity for all public input to be heard.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion is passed. Presentation and approval of proposed new AP US History curriculum. Dr. Andrus.
I think this section, we're gonna have public comment.
What a good idea.
So as with the regular pattern, you'll have these and you can read the name that precedes. There's a total of 17 cards. Or the following.
Is that me? Oh,
That's just me.
okay. Okay, the first person to speak will be David Barrett, and the second person following Mr. Barrett will be Maria Lianza. Welcome.
Hi.
Dr. Andrus, President Diffley,
and board members. Thank you for your willingness to listen to community input before making a final decision on the textbook proposed specifically for the AP American History course. Among the approved list of 6 textbooks on the California Social Studies adoption list for the course, the book entitled Give Me Liberty has taken on wide criticism. Most of the discontent for this book centers around the writing style of the author, Eric Foner. Much of the textbook reads like an opinion piece or persuasive essay than a straightforward textbook emphasizing verified historical events and facts. The writer's agenda is sprinkled throughout the various sections of the book. I cannot give every example of bias I noticed within my given time frame, so I will focus on a couple of areas vital to the foundation of our country addressed in the original U.S. Constitution. These 2 areas include the Electoral College, pages 1104 and 357, and the 3/5 clause, pages 254 and 255, which have been the subjects of debate since their inception. I have my own thoughts surrounding these 2 issues, but that is not the point of my criticism of the Give Me Liberty book. My criticism is that Foner inserts his own opinion into the subject matter, as he typically gives only one side of these issues. It seems to be an attempt to teach students what to think. For example, he says the Constitution is less than a democratic structure, page 253, and that the Constitution's slavery clauses embed slavery more deeply than ever, page 255. You may want to check some of the, if you want James Madison to weigh in, you may want to check the convention notes from the Constitutional Convention in 1787. But again, it is not about my opinion versus Foner's opinion in this isolated issue. The bigger point is that the author frequently leaves out opposing viewpoints. However, there is another book on our state's adoption list that consistently brings out both sides of an issue. This textbook, American History, Connecting with the Past by Alan Brinkley, should be heavily considered as it significantly helps teach students how to think. Our students need not to be indoctrinated with one-sided opinion, but with multiple perspectives in debate to be educated. Thank you. I have copies of, if I can give them to the board. Is that possible?
Hand them to.
Give them here to the secretary and she'll pass.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Is it Maria or Marla?
Maria.
Oh, good, thank you. And following
And then-
Maria will be Pam Barrett.
And this is laying my tech support.
Oh, fine. Yeah. Oh, I'll be happy. Well, I did, but I will do it again. Maria Lianza. You bet.
Dr. Andrews and board members, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'd like to compare the Give Me Liberty book featured section, Who is an American, by Eric Foner, versus the American History, Connecting the Past, Patterns of Popular Culture, authored by Alan Brinkley, and AP exam scorers, John Hirsch and Michael Flam. Most people are depicted as victims of a horrible American nation, or as those who did horrible things to minorities in America in Eric Foner's Give Me Liberty feature, Who is an American. There seemed to be a constant dark, negative view of America in these segments. For example, on page 116, Foner uses a younger quote of Ben Franklin, painting him as a racist, yet doesn't mention that Franklin founded America's first abolition society. In contrast, the patterns of popular culture included many uplifting segments of our varied American society. Our students need textbooks that include the good, the bad, and the ugly, not just the bad and the ugly. In this way, the Brinkley textbook has a great advantage. Here are a few examples of Brinkley's patterns of popular culture. And what we have here is, this is how they're presented in the book. We just made bigger copies so you could see. In the section on Lucy and Desi, I Love Lucy became the most popular TV show in spite of it having an ethnically mixed couple as leads. In the golden age of comic books, it gave us Superman, Batman, and others. They were idealized versions of the ideal boy. Smart, good, and strong. In the films, the section on the films of Frank Capra. Frank Capra directed movies like It's a Wonderful Life, which became and still is very popular. Capra believed that America stood for individual opportunity. In rock music of the 60s, we had groups like Jimi Hendrix, The Who, The Grateful Dead, who defied authority, but great music was created. In the section on dance halls, the dance halls in the 1920s were places where freedom could be celebrated and inhibitions could be set aside and prizes could be won. The mall, in the mall section, malls opened in 1924 in Kansas City. Besides providing retail needs, they became a social gathering place, and they still are. These are some of the examples of positive cultural aspects that were presented in the book, Patterns of Popular Culture. They contributed to the well-being of Americans, especially during the troubled times. So please choose Patterns of Popular Culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Barrett. And Pam will, Mrs. Barrett will be followed by Jose Carreño. Pam Barrett.
All right. Dr. Andrus and board members, students need to learn the good, the bad, the ugly concerning our nation's history. The lessons learned through both the sins and triumphs of America's past have built a country that I revere. I bought the Sarah Foner book, Give Me Liberty, after I spent 3 2-hour days in the district foyer studying the content. I realized this book was riddled with editorial bias, half-truths, and one-sided narrative, and a lack of opportunity presenting debate of the issues, and knew I needed a hard copy to note these concerns with examples. Foner's book was such a depressing read. At 8 years old, I've lived through enough decades of history to personally witness people of many cultures face remarkable challenges only to successfully rise above them through hard work and determination. I was inspired by real life stories. However, the Foner book brought me to no such encouragement concerning the land that I love. I then heard the names of 5 other textbooks on the California Social Studies adoption list that we in the community weren't given the option to see. We took it upon ourselves to view portions of 4 of those online, which definitely had negative racial overtones and innuendo. Seeing a limited number of pages on this 5th book, American History Connecting the Past, online, showed some promise. So I took a deeper dive to be able to compare it with the Foner book. Connecting with the Past is published by McGraw-Hill, a well-known company, and written by Alan Brinkley, who served as professor at Columbia University for 20 years, along with a high school teacher and university professor who both score AP history exams. Honestly, Brinkley's textbook, although not perfect, was refreshing because it read like more of like a balanced textbook. It's written chronologically with themes and thematic learning objectives, timelines, AP exam practice tests, chapter reviews, and its companion text, 5 Steps to an AP. U.S. history, written by a history professor who also scores AP U.S. history exams. In the Brinkley textbook, I found consistent features throughout, such as patterns of popular culture, debating the past, America and the world, consider the source and timelines of historical developments. Brinkley certainly points out the bad and the ugly, but also reveals the good that is America. Sadly, after reading the Foner book, I felt down and quite frankly discouraged with the prospect that the future generation will acquire a disdain for these great United States. And these are 2 pages out of there. I made these connections. We actually have that book from long ago. And baseball players, soldiers during the Civil War actually took their bats off with them to fight. And in between battles, they played baseball. Thank you.
Jose, oh, there you are. Jose Carreño, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews, board members, good evening. When I read through, forgive me,
Yvette, Anthony will be the next speaker. Sorry.
sorry. Tell me when.
Wait,
All right. When I read through the fauna or AP history book, I didn't like it. But I thought that the district's choice was the best of a bad list of choices allowed by the state. My first impulse was to give the district the benefit of the doubt. But now that I have read America First by McGraw-Hill, I have become suspicious. I asked myself, why was this biased and opinionated fauna book the first choice when there is a much more objective and detailed book on the state's list? It seems that someone made a conscious decision to go with an extremely left biased fauna book. The question I have is why? Makes me wonder if somebody has an agenda. So I have gone through this book. I read through the book, American History. I like it. There are many examples in it of detailed and objective events in history. I'll give you two that contrast the difference between the two books. The first one, the Zoot Suit riots in LA. Here's how the Fauna book covers the LA riots, the Zoot Suit riots. I'm quoting, the Zoot Suit riots of 1943, in which club-wielding sailors and policemen attacked Mexican-American youth wearing flamboyant clothing in the streets of Los Angeles, illustrated the limits of wartime tolerance. That's it. One vague and leading sentence. I'm not expecting footnotes, but give me some details or reasons leading up to the event. In contrast, this book, the American History text, covers this event in 2 full paragraphs with much more details that help explain the event and alleged causes. It explains the roots of the Zoot Suiters as pachucos and vividly describes their distinctively styled and activities. I grew up in South LA. These details that I read in this book completely jive with the oral history I received and I experienced personally. I'd love to read you the entire 8 sentences, but I don't have the time. Another example is the Bay of Pigs incident. The Fauna book spends 5 sentences describing it, while this book, the American History book, devoted 9 sentences to it. The Fauna book explains that it was a failure, but doesn't explain why. What were the causes? The American History book details the lack of Cuban support and Kennedy's failure to provide air support were the causes. This last fact is pertinent to understand the complexity of the Hispanic community. Kennedy's denial of air support to the free Cubans is the reason for why many Cuban Americans defected from the Democratic Party. Mr. Perdue, I voted for you. I supported you. Sir, please, I'm asking you, support this book. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yvette, Anthony and Danielle,
Yes, first, can I give to the clerk?
sure. Danielle Ciulo will be next. And if I murdered your name, let me know and I'll fix it.
Okay. Last month, when the proposed new curriculum was on display for public review, I read the Give Me Liberty book. I realized right away there must be a better book than this. I asked for a list of the other textbooks that could be considered. There were a total of 6, Give Me Liberty and 5 others. After doing some homework, it became clear that the best choice in this category is American History Connecting the Past by McGraw-Hill. It has distinguished authors and complete AP alignment. In fact, it is crafted for AP success. What I'm going to tout now, though, is really one of the main features that I think the school board, not the school board, but the teachers and staff will appreciate, which is its robust digital resources, including the ebook, smart book, mapping, and primary and secondary source activities, assignable AP unit reviews and test prep, and tools to customize assessments that help to meet individual styles and needs. The Teacher's Edition ebook includes activities and discussion prompts, questions reflecting the AP US History exam, and pacing guides for the print edition in a digital format. This teacher's ebook also provides convenient, searchable way to access all content from the American History Teacher Wraparound Edition. The Smart Book that students will use is an assignable, adaptive study tool that features personalized learning with self-guided tools that assesses proficiency and knowledge, track which topics have been mastered, and identify areas that need more study. The Smart Book delivers meaningful practice with guidance and instant feedback and recharges learning with personalized recommendations, and it allows teachers to assign materials at the topic and subtopic level. And this market-leading 5 Steps to a 5 AP US History delivers unparalleled exam prep. In summary, this book provides the best supplemental sources and assessments for our students to be successful. The organization is easy to use for both teachers and students. Throughout the book, it models the format of the APUSH exam questions so students can easily practice them. It is written especially for the APUSH classroom and provides detailed references to the course framework and exam. McGraw-Hill has McGraw-Hill, what did I write here? Has long which been respected and reliable text for AP US History seems like the obvious choice. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And after Danielle Ciulo will be Josephina Hartley. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Dr. Andros and board. I'm a wife, mother, a former history teacher, and forever a student. Sorry, I'm so nervous. I feel like this is a teacher thing. Who got into education to make a difference, but it all started here. I remember holding a shovel and breaking ground at E.L. Curran, being the first 6th grade class at Thompson Middle School, thriving at MVHS where my love for history grew, and my dream of becoming a history teacher blossomed. I even got a scholarship from former school board members to pursue my teaching career. This district's mission of inspiring every student to think, to learn, to achieve, to care truly came full circle when I got to come back to MVHS to do my student teaching and master's research under what I consider, and if you've been in Murrieta long enough, with my 11th grade AP US history teacher, Mr. Joe Trainer. Education should be the pursuit of a deeper understanding and constant curiosity. AP US History is a rigorous, fast-paced, and arduous course, and as the number of Murrieta students wanting to challenge themselves, we deserve to give them the best. We all know that there is no perfect textbook, and I took it upon myself to review some of the other textbooks because I also have a background in curriculum development. I looked at Fabric of a Nation, and while there's some great nuggets, I noticed a few things it was lacking, and I find extremely important for this course that can be found in Brinkley's AP American History, Connecting with the Past. I looked at these textbooks through the lenses of an educator and a student. Looking at one of MVUSD's strategic direction points is to integrate rigorous, relevant, and sequential academic curriculum to meet the needs of our 21st century learners. And this book does that. It's crafted for AP success as it is completely aligned with the AP framework because it identifies and evaluates diverse historical interpretations. Even on collegeboard.com uses this book as a model for a sample course syllabus. It fosters critical thinking, which is central to the instruction, practice, and assessments. Its thematic learning design includes a variety of cultural connections because history is an ongoing story about the past and present. My thesis was centered on fostering critical thinking and empowering learners to take ownership of their learning, knowing we all have different learning styles. This Brinkley textbook contains robust digital resources, test prep, and tools to customize assessment to help meet needs, individual learning styles, and needs. So please consider Brinkley's book, AP American History. Thank you.
Thank you. Josephina Hartley. And
Yes.
following Josephina will be John Leonard. Well-
Yes, my name is Josefina, and I grew up in Mexico. What they say about Trump at the end of this book is what I had an issue with. This Give Me Liberty doesn't tell the whole story. So in my hometown, a 40-year-old man raped a young girl and got her pregnant, and he denied it until the little girl was born and looked like his firstborn daughter. It happened in my hometown, like I said. And it is a well-known saying, run for the border to escape the law and the family. So this guy, Nico, fled to Chicago, where he still lives. And another example of is the rape tree at the border, reported by San Antonio TV station back in 2014. And this confirmed by Mayra Flores, who was a Texas congresswoman married to a Border Patrol agent. And everyone can find out more information on social media, Rumble, YouTube. Look it up, the rape tree at the border. And I'm saying this because I'm addressing comments that somebody made about Trump. And I do not have a master's degree, but I feel like my opinion should count because this is 1 out of 15 books. And I think that the people of Murrieta should have a say-so. And I say, if we don't have a say-so, then vote no on the bond. And I want to say it in Spanish. Madres y padres de familia, infórmate de lo que enseñan a tus hijos en las escuelas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And after John Leonard, we'll hear from Alice Forney. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. In what may have been a violation of the educational code, or at least an attempt to skirt around it, the public was not invited to join the teachers committee formed to create curriculum and choose new textbooks. Murrieta taxpayers and parents were forced to form their own committee to examine the books approved for selection. Subsequently, citizens formed a taxpayer committee, which includes teachers, both current and retired, with over 115 years of combined service. Our educational experience extends from high school graduates to those with postgraduate degrees, all in all, a well-rounded group. We taxpayers protest the lack of time we've been allowed to present here tonight. Last week, I was dismissed by the Teachers Committee for not being qualified to offer an opinion regarding their choice of the AP textbook, Give Me Liberty. This evening, I will risk dismissal once again. Its author, Eric Foner, was awarded the 2011 Pulitzer for History and what his colleagues at Columbia University called, quote, a landmark work of deep scholarship and insight. In 2011, that very well may have been true, but in the case of Give Me Liberty, Mr. Foner appears to have lost his mojo. I find this text shallow and shamelessly biased. As long as Pulitzer continues to heap accolades upon the Washington Post and the New York Times, I will remain unimpressed. At last week's board meeting, I also mentioned the danger of technology creeping into our classrooms. Attached to the Foner text are supplemental links to online content, primarily video presentations. We have no control over where these links lead and can never predict where they will in the future. Uncontrolled internet links of this sort cannot be acceptable. I find the idea of 600 school districts around the country adopting this textbook frightening. The text I found to be an excellent choice is The American History Connecting with the Past, authored by Alan Brinkley. Mr. Brinkley, educated at Harvard and Princeton, was university provost and a professor of history at Columbia University, and also a professor of history and a trustee of Oxford University Press. I reviewed the chapters of the Brinkley text examining the American Revolutionary period. While Give Me Liberty glosses over subject matter, the Brinkley book delves deep, offering perspectives from the point of view of Native Americans, British, French, and the colonists. I was impressed with the broad knowledge presented and the depth of analysis of each section. Prominent women of the Revolutionary period, such as Native Mohican Mary Brandt, Abigail Adams, Mary Ludwig, are introduced. This affords young women an opportunity to learn that all Americans played a role in the Revolution, not just the men. On pages 9-15 of the Brinkley text, a somewhat fair assessment of Mr. Trump's presidency is presented. At least some of his accomplishments are listed. How Mr. Foner presented Trump is simply insulting to a community that overwhelmingly supported him. Claiming that Foner's opinion of President Trump is supported by social media entry and debate or rally transcripts, often lacking in context, are tired smear tactics. So I urge the board to adopt the book and also this very excellent exam study guide as well too. And thank you
Thank you.
for letting me run over.
After Alice Forney, we'll hear from Terry Wells. Welcome.
Hi, as far as the social studies curriculum is concerned, I'd like to say to the board to hold the line. The majority is with you. It doesn't matter what qualifications the author Eric Foner has. He's put out a biased textbook to indoctrinate the younger generations. The left appears determined to include a Trump bashing textbook in our schools while completely ignoring or being indifferent to the fact that pull down maps in many Murrieta classrooms still include Leningrad and the USSR. Maybe we should wait until a textbook's written that includes the Durham report, that explains how Hillary Clinton fabricated a Russia collusion hoax to vilify her political opponent, and then President Obama and Vice President Biden knew was a lie back in August of 2016. Yes, Obama fundamentally changed America. If this book is approved, it will be one more bad decision made by a school board that drove Murrieta voters to choose a new school board members last November. Voters overwhelmingly chose 3 conservative seats. We all know the conservative vote was intentionally split in that 3rd seat now held by Nancy Young. Nick and Julie have been accused of not being qualified to be on this board and make those kinds of decisions, but they love their God, their families, and this community. Nick's been accused of being a Christian nationalist for this. The alternative is a godless globalist. Julie's been accused that homeschooling disqualifies her. I say it makes her confident and brave. Last week, she was ridiculed for not knowing the meaning of PLC. And whether or not you know the meaning of SST, IEP, PLC, CST, SDC, RSP, EDD, SPED, NGSS, PBIS, DSC, PD, LRE, RFET, BLL, and SEL, you wouldn't be more qualified than you already are by garnering the majority of the vote. And that alone is a BFD. They were elected by a sound majority to come make better decisions than we have experienced in past years. Nick and Julie, stick to your principles. The majority is behind you all the way. And when all of you look at them, know that they are our duly elected representatives, of whom we are well pleased. Listen to them.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Diffley, Mr. Dr. Andrus, and the school board.
Just hold
Thank you
on.
for letting me speak. Yo, sorry.
Next name.
Terry,
Yes, that's me.
that's you. Yeah, and after you will be Pastor Brian Hawkins.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening again. John Lennon wrote, "Imagine all the people living life in peace. Imagine peace here in this room with 412 and the rest of us. It's a tension-filled room, and I'm the dreamer. I hope maybe that we will have peace in these school board meetings when this national culture war hopefully ends. The way I see it is that today our school board is planning once again to reject the top quality, top selling AP history textbook, Give Me Liberty, and instead replace it next week with probably the AP text you're all mentioning that the 412 churches told you to read. Am I to understand that you're all doing this because Give Me Liberty apparently does not profess sufficient admiration for President Trump? You want to ban CRT and this is your way of doing it? That is what the Press Enterprise article seems to indicate today, and that is what reporters get straight. They get the facts straight. This is an attack on anybody who has different thinking. Only 4 to 6% of the AP history exam is based on present day time period. So essentially, you're planning on rejecting a high quality textbook, the top in the nation, for political reasons. I am still appalled that Mr. Nick Pardue called Give Me Liberty garbage. As I mentioned last week, one of the most conservative reviewers of textbooks in the nation said that Give Me Liberty, quote, approaches brilliance, end quote. When extreme school board conservatives in Woodland, Colorado, actually ones quite similar to those on our school board here today, took control, they adopted a highly partisan textbook. As a result, more than 40% of the teachers quit. If this keeps up, I think it will be hard to keep as well as attract teachers to work in Murrieta. They're not here today. They looked at all these textbooks. They looked at the AP history book. They chose Give Me Liberty. By not selecting what they chose, you are disrespecting them. You will be completely ignoring their advice by not adopting Give Me Liberty. I would hate to see Murrieta Valley Unified become financially strapped in a few years because of lawsuits. Realistically, parents of color whose children are denied learning their history are going to sue. Parents of children who are gay or trans or mistreated could sue. Is your goal to silence everyone here who is not white and not a Trump supporter? Our culture is changing. We all need to live together in peace. This district is getting a bad nationwide rap for the course it has chosen with rejecting Give Me Liberty. It's not a good look for Murrieta to have. We don't need this. We need the community to wake up to the fact that slick brochures got the conservatives on this board elected. That's what it took. Wake up, Murrieta. In conclusion, if you reject this textbook again, which I suppose you will.
Thank you. Following Pastor Brian Hawkins will be Martha Williamson. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. The term is it's called buck broken. It's a term that was used during the transatlantic slave trade when they brought the first Africans into America. The reason why they buck broke the black male, and it's a horrific issue that they did. They would take the strongest black male and bring him in front of his family, his children, and in front of other black enslaved Africans. And what they would do is they would bring the overseer to humiliate this black slave by raping him. That's right. Another overseer would rape a black male to destroy his manhood, to take away his identity. They didn't want him to be called his name from Africa. They wanted him to be called his name here in America. That's American history. It's important to understand that because they didn't want the Africans to know their history. They didn't want them to know who they were. It's called buck broken. If you Google it, you'll read a lot of information about it. Why am I bringing that up? Because all of what's happened in American history, from 1619 to 2023, all the atrocities that blacks have explained and felt in America, not have one time have they attacked America. You will not find not one African country that raised war against America. You will not find not one black in America has waged war in America against America. They never went into the Capitol to raise siege. They never attacked white people. As much as individuals want to believe it, black people do not hate white people in America. They hate what America has done to black people in America. The robbing of identities, the red coding, the redlining, the black codes, keeping black people from not knowing who they are. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, I'm not my ancestors. I'm not the past. I never owned slaves. But what you're doing today is exactly what buck broken did then. Keep black people from their history. Keep them from their identity. Keep them from knowing who they are. And that right there is one of the greatest American travesties here in this country, is to not know who you are. There's so many things that we've been called. One of the worst things we've been called in America is a nigger. And that was the name we was given through buck broken. And it became so strong that black folks start calling each other that word. To this day, it's what's up, my nigga. That wasn't something we brought from Africa. That was something that was given here in America. As tough as a word that is. And here you are today, want to ban the one book. Look at the side of the individuals who want to ban it. The one book that teaches history, that teaches what we should be learning today. And so I'm asking you right now, don't look at black people anymore in America as niggas. Don't ban this book, because banning this book, Give Us Liberty, is the same equivalent as buck broken. And I'm not your Negro in America anymore. Thank you.
Hear now from Martha Williamson, and after Martha, we'll hear from Desiree Ferraro. Welcome.
Malia Williamson. I'm sorry. I don't know. It must be a typo. It's Malia Williamson.
Oh.
It's not Martha.
Malia. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm the president of Riverside County Now. It's a local advocacy group for women's rights and LGBTQ rights. I'm here to speak on thoughts of some of the students in your district that I have spoken to. I wish more of them were here because this is really something that affects them. I will start with my personal story. My family moved here from Pakistan for better educational opportunities. My older sister went on to become a physician. My younger brother is a mechanical engineer, and I have my bachelor's and master's in chemical engineering. My parents had full confidence in the curriculum our teachers taught. And given the success of this school district, why mess with it? I owe all my success to my teachers who supported me through some of the most critical decisions in my life. I took AP history in high school. It covered everyone's history. We learned about our ancestors' sacrifices. We learned about the change makers whose shoulders we stood on to achieve our own dreams. We learned about the heroes of the wars we fought, including the Civil War. Our teachers covered all the history, and it wasn't cherry-picked. I still remember when I read some of the slave journals and how moved I was reading the perspective and the perspective that I earned by reading some of the atrocities that the slaves went through. Isn't that what it's about? Isn't the point to prepare our kids for the real world by teaching them lessons from our history so that we can evolve into better, more compassionate human beings? If you're going to take history out of history books, you're robbing them of these valuable lessons. You may be able to stop a book from being taught at school or have words removed from their curriculum, but your kids are eventually going to step into the real world. And the question will be, did you prepare them for it? Or did you shelter them from the truth? I have attended a few of your school board meetings here, and it is my strong recommendation to keep the church, the 412 church, out of the school. They're playing on your fears. They're hijacking your religion, and they're teaching the teachings of Jesus Christ, and it's irreparable harm to your school district.
Quiet, please.
Where we stand today, the present, will be covered in the history books tomorrow. Ask yourself how important it is for you to be on the right side of history. Will your kids and your grandkids be defending you or despising you? Ask yourself, are you able to acknowledge the atrocities towards your fellow Americans, or do you want to be known as someone who sided with the 412 church to spread hate and division among your communities? Do you want to side with someone who people at the January 6th insurrection had on speed dial? How far out the ledge are you able to go with this con man? My request is to not let one person burn your entire school district down. You have something very special going on here, one of the highest high school graduation rate and college acceptance rates, and you should protect that. Mr. Diffley, you seem like a reasonable person. Please don't let Tim Thompson hijack your reasoning. Use your moral code. His goal isn't to provide the best education in your district. It's about manufacturing problems that don't exist. Thank you.
Desiree Ferraro, and next after Desiree will be Courtney Schumacher. Welcome.
Hello, Dr. Andrus, again, President Diffley, and the rest of the board. I'm representing myself tonight, a Murrieta resident and a homeowner, okay? And I have a legitimate concern about how my already very high property taxes are spent. So I do appreciate the last meeting's vote to postpone the approval of that one controversial AP history textbook because it gave me time to speak with several other Murrieta parents, teachers, and grandparents. Not one of them attend 412 church, just want to make that clear. However, all of them shared the same concern about the book. And that concern is that it is a dark representation of American history, and it does tout just one side of several issues. But instead of just saying no, these parents did their research, and we're offering a better than acceptable alternative. I hope you're going to agree. I am not as prepared as the rest of all these speakers are, but someone did happen to help with making copies because she was making copies for other things as well. And I'm going to read some of these, but if you'll accept these, you guys can review them later. But the Brinkley book, American History Connecting the Past, one of the things that stood out was that it aptly lends to the considering of two viewpoints to historical events and issues. And so it provides the students an opportunity to analyze and evaluate historical arguments. So here's some of the topics that encourage, within this book, encourage debate instead of just, laying it out as an opinion. American Revolution, the meaning of the Constitution, the causes of the Civil War, Reconstruction, the New Deal, the question of Pearl Harbor, the decision to drop the atomic bomb, the Civil Rights Movement. So if this more balanced, in this more balanced textbook, it makes a pointed effort to allow for debate on both sides of controversial issues. So out of respect for the values of the parents and the voters in the community, not just the teachers, I'd like to see the board reject Foner's partisan and biased book, which it is, and approve Brinkley's superior AP history textbook. Thank you so much.
And following Courtney Schumacher will be Frances Burns. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you regarding the AP textbook. I know Nancy Young and Linda Lunn expressed at the meeting last month that the AP textbook is a college level course and should be treated as so. I don't have a degree or any special training. I homeschool our two sons here in Murrieta. My 5th grader is completing school at a 7th grade level with ease, and my 9th grader is scheduled to graduate high school early. I have helped them reach this point with love, dedication, and just a high school diploma. My 9th grader is currently completing his 4th college course. He attends Fullerton College and is assigned very strenuous and controversial schoolwork. He has done classroom debates and intense essays on topics varying from COVID, vaccines, defunding police, Black Lives Matter, border policy, Trump, and more. It's not ideal to introduce my kids to these topics, but I know there is no hiding it. YouTube, social media, and other avenues have been exposing our youth to these topics for years, so my husband and I decided to equip them while they're still at home so we can have healthy conversation as they continue to develop and mature. I was impressed to find each class, which one was a college level US history class, has been fairly balanced. Although his professors have been left-leaning and personally view these topics different than me, I commend them for keeping the class unbiased. Each professor has made a point to provide the students access to credible sources addressing each side of the argument so the students can make their own judgments. It was important to me that I express my son's present-day college experience to the board and those present. If a one-sided college level curriculum is being presented to our high school students, that should be concerning. College level curriculum does present a wide variety of controversial topics, but at no point should these topics be used to influence young students to one viewpoint. At a college level, they should be introduced to topics, credible information, and allow the student to develop their own opinion from an unbiased viewpoint, just as Fullerton has done for my son and his classmates. I'm asking the board to listen and to take to heart the concerns of the parents they are representing when proceeding with this curriculum and future items. Thank you.
Thank you. And following Frances Burns will be Bob Cowell.
Good afternoon, board members. Good afternoon, Dr. Andrus. I hope everybody is well today. To inspire every student to think, learn, achieve, and care. That's our district slogan. I have deep concerns about the Give Me Liberty textbook because there have been many instances where the author's comments present an extreme bias. And despite many of the claims for adopting the book, like the teacher's effort and their qualifications and their years experience and the author's awards and the fact that it's an AP course, none of that's important. What's important is the content of the book. And the content of the book, there are many places where it's biased and it is not objective. And I'm going to select one right here. Yet the election of Trump to succeed him with a campaign that appealed to voters hostile to immigration and resentful that a Black man occupied the White House suggested that issues as old as the Republic remained as contested as ever. I did not vote the way I voted in 2016 and 2020 because of prejudice. I voted the way I did because of policy. That's why. And when you read this quote and others, they are presented as fact when they are opinion. And there is nothing in here to support that opinion, nor are there alternative perspectives. So in my opinion, this textbook, because of the many quotes similar to this, is inappropriate for these students. What are we going to teach them to think? How are we going to teach them to think when you adopt a textbook that is highly biased? There's no alternatives to consider. And what are they learning when you adopt a textbook that is biased like this? Does that mean bias is acceptable in the context of education? I don't think so. So I'm urging the board, please, to reject the book, Give Me Liberty, and to consider an alternative. Thank you very much for listening.
Following Mr. Cowell, the last speaker will be Stuart Sheldon. Welcome.
Hello there. Good to see you all. I couldn't agree more with Francis Burns. He nailed it right on the head. I do not go to 412 Church, by the way. So we want to make that clear. And I also want to make clear that Julie Vandergrift does not go there either. And I don't think Nick Pardue does either. And a lot of the people that spoke up here are not in lockstep with 412 Church. We just believe in we want to do the right thing. That's why we're here. That book. The book that is objectionable, it was just one of the 14. And I want to say, experts picked this book. Experts from the administration or the teachers proposed 14 books to be adopted. The board adopted 13 out of the 14. The 14th book, Give Me Liberty, should not be adopted because the people, not the administration and some teachers, don't want a biased book without in-depth references or to both sides of an issue shoved down the throats of children with no oversight from the people that pay for these books and the taxes that pay for the bloated cost of the administrative costs in books. Experts in the past have failed us many times. The experts said Y2K was going to be a disaster. It was not. The experts said that Trump colluded with Russia, and that has been found lately and before to be completely false, and is still, Washington Post still says it's true. They lie. I listened to experts when I went to college in the 1970s. They told me that the experts said, and all the newspapers said, there was going to be a coming ice age. I thought, well, with that, we should be looking at alternative energies. So I was looking at geothermal, solar. I got into, I did my senior project in solar at Cal Poly Pomona. And I found out if you covered the whole earth in solar panels, you'd still only get 5% of the energy we needed at that time. The experts said that we would reach peak oil by 1980, meaning that we wouldn't have enough oil by that time, and that we would have to look to alternative energy anyway. And fusion energy or fission energy was not acceptable. We were looking into fusion. I was personally looking into fusion as an engineer. They said the countries would be underwater like 10 years ago. They're not. What happened? Those are the experts who said that. The experts who have high degrees, PhDs, the ones that made these kinds of books. I just want to say the experts have said it wouldn't be raining very much in California anymore, and this has been the rainiest year since 1952. Anybody that has a degree these days or gets awards, it doesn't mean anything anymore. When I'm out of time.
Stuart Sheldon, welcome.
Thanks for having me. My family has been in the Murrieta School District, living inside the district for the last 35 years. Both of our sons attended Murrieta School District schools from elementary school all the way through high school, graduated from Murrieta Valley High School. They both were AP history students, and they got a great education here. And they were able to take that and take it on into their college studies and each graduate from colleges, Cal Poly Pomona and Cal State Long Beach. So I appreciate the job that the district has done in my personal family's experience. Also, my wife was a teacher in the district for 20 years. So we do have a connection, even though we no longer have children and are actively involved in district matters. Concerning the issue at hand, I would say that what I've experienced listening here today, and also I've taken the time to listen to the audio and visual files of the last two meetings. I think what's happening, I see it here today, is that we are interjecting politics into what should be an educational issue. And I'm sorry that that's happening. I notice that people have great convictions on both sides of the issue. And some of them have done a lot of study, and that's laudable. I'm glad that they've done that. They seem to be also promoting a different text. And if you consider their suggestion seriously, I wish you would give the rest of the community an opportunity of some length to look into that text as well. And so I would say that I have read Eric Foner's other works, a couple of them, one, his work on Reconstruction, his book on Reconstruction, and also his book on the Underground Railroad. And I find him to be an accomplished scholar. I would say also that we have to remember that all history is written from the point of view. And also you need to give credits to your students. They're aware of what's going on in this day and age. And you're not going to really don't try to protect them from something. Give them the skills to think, not how to think, but to think, and let them come to a conclusion based on the skills that they are going to be learning in classes like AP History, critical thinking skills. That's important, and that's certainly what my sons learned when they were here in the district. Thank you very much.
B1, presentation and approval of proposed new AP US history curriculum. Dr. Andrews.
So trustees, I'm going to join staff on the floor for just a moment, but I'm going to pass something out to you and I'll describe in just a minute. So I want to thank the public for their comments and recognize this is not a forum or a community debate or anything like that. This is a board's meeting, the meeting of the board. And so there's a presentation by staff to the board.
This one.
So trustees, as you know, I'm your one employee and all the rest of them, they all work for me. And so I joined staff for just a moment to kind of just initiate this presentation, and I'll join you on the dais in just a moment. Just as by way of review, we did get to this point because this particular item, this particular title was requested for further discussion. And that's what we've prepared today. Staff has spent the last few weeks gathering information, going a deeper dive as the questions presented and kind of came up at the last time when this one was voted to be postponed or not approved yet at that point in time, so that we could answer some of those questions. So the intent of the presentation is to present the information that was requested, give you some background information on the AP course itself, the framework of the test, and also the rationale how staff came to that conclusion. Okay, so just as a guide, Jennifer Shriver, our Executive Director of Secondary Schools, has been our presenter today. You have a copy of the slides. I know they've been attached to the agenda. To help the flow of this, there's a couple of break points as indicated. So if you could hold your questions to those slide numbers, that way she can get through each subject and then field questions under each topic. Okay. All right, we're delighted to be here today and have a chance to take a deeper dive into this topic. Clearly, our community cares about what's going on in our schools, and all of us do too. That's why we come to work every day. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. In order to explain the book choice, I'm going to start with key components that impacted our selection. First, I'm going to take you through the background of the course and its history in our district. Next, we'll go to the College Board framework for the AP US History course. This course is also called APUSH, so you might hear me refer to it as that as well. And then this will lead us into the AP exam and what it looks like, so we can see some sample questions to see the level of questioning that's going on. And then once we understand the criteria our teachers are striving to obtain, we will then see the components of the textbook and why it is preferred and to the others that were evaluated. AP US History is a rigorous college course that prepares students to take a culminating exam. Students strive to earn a 3, 4, or 5 on this exam, so they may obtain college credit. Our AP US History course is directly aligned to the College Board course framework. We are currently offering 7 sections with a total of 174 students enrolled in the course, and you can see the breakdown between our 3 high schools. And there are 4 teachers currently teaching this course. The course is a social studies elective, and the students who choose to take this course are typically high-achieving students headed straight to a 4-year university. This is a historical chart to show our participation and success rates on the exam. You can see it's delineated for how many students scored at each of the different levels of the test. The goal is for students to score a 3 or above to earn college credit. The data tells a story. As you can see, we had a pandemic in the middle of it, and that has definitely impacted scores and enrollment. We're coming back, but it's been a slow process. You can also see that there is room for growth in our scores, which illustrates the need to adopt a textbook aligned to the framework and the exam. Questions? Yes. Right now, I'm focusing on our choice and all of the details for why we have chosen that. I don't have the information to correctly address that right now.
She's giving the background and the framework's coming up.
Okay. All right. So our APUSH course framework component. So this is the document that's given to us by College Board and specifically tells what needs to be taught in this course for the students to be successful on this exam. It is a 276-page document. It was attached to the board agenda, so if people have opened that and looked at it. I've pulled some critical information to share, but realize it's a much more comprehensive piece. So the College Board publishes a framework for each of the AP courses to specifically address the criteria needed to be successful in the course on the exam. There's 2 key components in this particular course, and that is the historical thinking skills and reasoning processes. These skills and processes are central to the study and practice of U.S. history. Students should practice and develop these on a regular basis over the span of the course. And then the second component is the actual course content. The content is organized into commonly taught units of study that provide suggested sequences of the course. The units contain the content and conceptual understandings that colleges and universities typically expect students to understand and master. The content is thematic and utilizes cross-cutting concepts to build conceptual knowledge that spirals throughout the course. What makes AP US History particularly challenging is that it covers a relatively slim slice of history in a small geographic area, especially compared to other AP courses like European history and world history. Consequently, it requires students to possess a very detailed knowledge of US history. For example, students who would need to know the facts such as the exact date of a certain event that took place when they take this exam. To pass the AP US History exam, you will need more than just an ability to memorize information. You'll also need to be able to analyze historical events, interpret cause and effect, and write analysis and arguments. Only 48% of students who take this course score a 3 or higher on the exam, and only about 1 in 10 score a 5. APUSH is the second most difficult AP exam. This chart, so I had referred to the two different components in this course. This chart starts, actually go back one, please. This one starts with the historical thinking skills. And I'm showing you this to show you the complexity of what these students are being evaluated of and asked to do. If you follow across the top, it takes you through the skills. There's 6 total. What I'd like to do is just kind of focus in on a couple of them to just kind of tease out some of the language. So if you look to skill 2, which is sourcing and situation. If you look down to C, it is explain the significance of a source's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience, including how these might limit the uses of the source. So very sophisticated. And in 3, skill 3, which is claims and evidence and sources, explain how claims or evidence support, modify, or refute a source's argument. So there is a lot of synthesis and there's a lot of argumentation, which will take me to skill 6. And if we look down to D, the last one, it is corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument using diverse and alternative evidence in order to develop a complex argument. And if we just go down to the 4th bullet, because there's a lot in that one, it says explain how or why a historical claim or argument is or is not effective. So it's taking a side and being able to express why you believe one way or the other. As you can see, what this course is asking students is very sophisticated and challenging. Next one. The second part of that first criteria for the framework is the reasoning processes. Like the thinking skills, I want to acknowledge the high levels of reasoning required for this course. The cognitive operations that students are required to apply when taking the AP exam ultimately represent the way practitioners think in the discipline. Specific assets of the cognitive process are defined under each of the reasoning processes. Let's focus in on a few. So if we look at reasoning process number 1, which is comparison, and you look at the third one, it says explain the relative historical significance of similarities and or differences between different historical developments or processes. If we look to the next one, causation, explain how a relevant context influenced a specific historical development or process. And then if you look to the third, continuity and change, if you look at the third one on that as well, explain the relative historical significance of specific historical developments in relation to a larger pattern of continuity and or change. When you look at the thinking and reasoning skills required, it becomes evident why this course is the second most difficult AP exam. And then the second component of this framework is the actual content. And so what you'll find up here is just how the units are organized by the periods. The second piece is addressing the content. Each unit's broken down into teachable segments called topics. The topics pages contain all required content for each topic. In order for students to develop an understanding of these topics, teachers select specific historical figures, groups, and events, and the primary and secondary source documents with which they will be examined. That enables students to investigate them, a lot of investigation. On the right side of this slide, you can see the weight of the exam, and it shows this percentage of the exam in the unit so that the teacher knows what key areas to address when teaching. Okay, so that takes you through the framework, and I'll take any questions on the framework.
Yeah, I have. And maybe this is more for a teacher. When we look at the test scores, for example, you're talking about how difficult the test is to pass. I understand that there are a lot of kids who take this course with grade bump. And so the question is, not just the students, right? We have that issue. I also know that not all of the teachers do the greatest job in preparing their kids for this. So I'm a little bit concerned that the data that we're presenting is representing not necessarily how difficult the test is, but how prepared the students are. Is there any way that you could explain or try to, would you make an argument against what I just said about how that data might be a little bit misleading?
I think data tells a story and there's lots of ways to look at it. And you're absolutely correct in the fact that if you dig deeper, you're going to find all different kinds of situations. Like I referenced, we were in the middle of a pandemic. And so there were students with all kinds of different priorities. There was also a change in the way that students were tested during that time. So there's a lot of different variables with that. You would see in that chart the students that took the class that were enrolled versus the testing, because there is a difference with that. Ideally, we want all students to take the test, but we are not always successful in that happening. So,
and can I just add, the preparation varies from site to site as well, depending on instructor. We would have the data on that as well, wouldn't we?
I don't know that we would have we could look at individual scores and see the reflection there.
From
But
site to site, would that be true?
You could see it from site to site and from teacher to teacher.
But we
yeah.
don't have that data available, do we?
No. What happened with College Board was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It was right after somewhere in the last couple of years. They gave out the binders, which was the actual course framework. They hadn't done that as explicitly in the past. So each teacher was given one of those. So what it did was it aligned so that everybody had the same resources and the ability to know what was expected for the course and what was on the test. The second layer of that is what kind of textbooks and resources do you have that can help you actually teach that? That tells you what needs to be taught. It's not the book or the supplemental materials or any of that piece that gives you the ability to teach it.
And you had mentioned that some of our best students actually take AP US history.
Absolutely.
And they don't take another history class, maybe a world history, would you say? But US history would be their high school experience with US history if they took AP US.
If they took AP US, yes, that would be their choice unless they chose to take another course.
How do we balance preparing for the test and having, common knowledge? Because to give a quick example, we have a proud military community here in Murrieta. Almost all of them would know that our very first conflict was actually in Africa on the shores of Tripoli, because our sailors were being impressed and actually put into and enslaved. When we discuss the issues of slavery, and we're trying to draw these different historical comparisons, there's the Eastern slave trade, there's the Atlantic slave trade. I'm wondering how much our students who are headed off to college are even aware of that. I'm very concerned just from the public comments that I heard that we have a lot of adults who aren't aware of this dynamic in Africa that was happening, because it gives us perspective. So in addition to preparing our kids for the test, I want to believe we're preparing them to also understand their history. And I think that's important. And I'm also concerned, as someone who loves history, I've taught history and I read history. I took my history book and I would read the whole book. I wanted to see how modern times were being portrayed by the historians. This is fact. Historians are telling me this story. So what's in that textbook matters a lot. But I think my question goes back to just, if this is the history they get, and my daughter wants to go off into engineering, how much history is she going to get? This A push is what she's going to get, and maybe another class in college, right? So what we teach our kids is developing their framework of how the world's put together and how they understand our history. So I think this is vitally important, the question of how we balance what we're teaching about the breadth of our history to our children, our best and brightest, versus preparing them for the test. So how do we balance that?
So this course, when you choose to take this course, because it's a college course and the goal is to earn the college credit, they follow the framework, which is what was attached, the 276-page document. It goes through what is addressed, which for the most part covers our state standards as well. And I can't get into the details. That's incredibly complex. This is 174 students that are in this. The other students are going to be in our traditional US history course, or they're going to be in a dual enrollment class, which is another college course. In our in our traditional US history course, it is students based. And that's where we have a unit planning organizer in which we look through the standards. We choose the most prevalent and important standards, and it's all timed out. And that is a document that actually we just started doing this year because we didn't have the text or the abilities to do that in the past. So this is a new movement. So we are aligning our curriculum. So there will be a blueprint, so to speak, for what students are accessing regarding U.S. history in
in comparing these two books is, so I'll just start with the American History Connecting with the Past. So Alan Brinkley says, business practice, this is about the 2008 financial crisis, which is a specific historical development. And so anyway, the Alan Brinkley says, business practices by financial institutions that lured millions of people into taking on large and risky mortgages were made possible with the 1999 repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. Okay. And so that author pretty much, makes it very simple, like leaves it there. So in Give Me Liberty, which is quite a contrast from that, goes into greater depth, discusses the risky loans. They were then securitized, then they became worthless when people defaulted on their loans, created a steep economic contraction, unemployment, and market collapse. And then Foner goes on to blame corporate misdeeds and ethos of deregulation, excessive borrowing and spending, and he goes on. And then he points to, quote, every president from Ronald Reagan onward, and then he talks about President Bush, quote, unable to come up with a response to the crisis. And that's the end of that quote. So in the Give Me Liberty book, Foner does mention the Glass-Steagall Act, which was from 1930s. But he never mentions the two presidents that signed legislation that weakened and repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, which is widely discussed to have led to the 2008 financial crisis. So anyway, in relation, going back to this reasoning process 3, and as we're saying here, all this information has to be given in a very limited time frame. So I'm just wondering, when you give the students a book, and I'm just comparing these two here, and they're expected, if they're young ages, this is a survey course, right? Even in college, it's a survey course. So I'm just wondering, in that limited time frame, and you have a book, and this is not the only example that I have of this, but how, I don't know. I don't have a lot of confidence in this, these 1,000 plus page books when we're trying to get the kids to, come up with these different perspectives. Where does that come from? If you have a book that's, going to blame 2 Republican presidents for weakening and repealing an act that was signed by 2 Democrat presidents, that just seems mixed up to me.
Yeah, if you look in the Foner book, he actually talks about Clinton and being a moderate Democrat, and how, especially during his second term, a lot of his legislation, financial legislation, continues deregulation that did start under President Reagan. I mean, we could really go back to President Nixon if you'd like. And then as a result of that, the domino effect does happen, which allows for the banking industry to be bailed out under President Bush. So Foner does talk about that with the other presidents.
I guess I'm just thinking in this particular section of the book, which I can find here in a moment, the 2 Republican presidents are mentioned in relation to that financial crisis. And I do have another example, actually.
He does talk about Clinton, though.
Well, not in that section.
Probably not, but when he does discuss Clinton. But also, please understand, as an APUSH teacher, you're lucky if we get to 2008. It's not on the AP test. It really is not. I promise you. I've taught this for 20 years. It's not on the test.
Did you say 2008?
Yeah, 2008. I can't discuss multiple choice questions because they have not technically been released. But the ones that the College Board has released to us, the furthest they've ever talked about is a vague question on the war on terror under President Bush, and that's it.
Well, of course, we don't know when they will include those things. And then that goes back to the question that Nick asked about, the ultimate point of everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the classroom, right? A book can't have absolutely everything. And so you need to trust the classroom teacher that we bring up perspectives. And I would not be doing my job correctly, especially as an AP teacher, if I'm not bringing up perspectives. And my students, you could definitely poll them. And again, I cannot speak for the other 3 AP teachers, but we always start off, okay, these were the presidents, and the next time frame we're going to discuss, we go over accomplishments and criticisms. because you have to be able to understand what they were up against during their presidency, because they need this type of evidence to be able to bring into their essays and into their short answer questions, or else they're not passing the AP test.
So we are talking about the textbook adoption, and I just want to kind of zoom out here for a minute. And this whole thing is coming from because the public was asked to, they were invited to look at the books. And so now we have one book that the public focused on that they are not pleased with. And so, so I think, we also talked about content back here in your, and the page right before it, well, before the course framework components. So the course content, I mean, when you get books, that has to be considered important, right? The content in the books, that if we're buying books,
well, of course,
that's important, right. So anyway, so all these people came here and gave their opinions about things. So I'm just.
Could I interject? I'm just curious. We are doing the textbook. We're on the framework slide right now because I was following I think we're trying to follow this. I might be lost. Am I lost?
No, we're trying to go through each part so the board has a complete understanding of all the elements, and we'll eventually get.
We're on the framework slide right now.
Understanding.
So the textbook will be at the end. We'll discuss more of the specifics of the textbook.
And relating to the textbook to the reasoning process that you talked about.
Right.
So is that you're telling me this is the wrong place to talk about the textbook?
I was thinking that we can get deeper into the textbook later. Would that be accurate?
Okay.
I'm just trying to put it in order.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody else? Question on the framework? Okay. So let's look at some test questions. Okay, there's multiple types of questions. I'm going to review 4 different types of questions so that you can see the context of what they are. So this is the one, and McCary already started to reference this. This was your dueling historians. So you will notice that there are 2 paragraphs from an original source document or from original source documents. These dueling historians, this is 2 excerpts that have a conflicting message, because what they're asking students to do is synthesize and make that comparison or argument between the 2. Students read these segments and then answer the questions below. If you will look at A, you will notice it requires students to address the different historical interpretations of 2 authors regarding the New Deal. So that conflict is a huge part of what these students are asked to deal with and to be able to verbalize within the test. Go ahead to the next one. The next one is a multiple choice. Usually when you give a multiple choice test to kids, they get excited because it means it's easy. You will notice on this is anything but easy. On the right is the actual question. And again, it is a quote. It is out of context, or it is a direct context to something else. And they are supposed to synthesize that and then respond. It is a multiple choice style, but the response is very complicated. If you will turn to the next slide, please. The third type is a document-based question. These are also known as DBQs. And you'll see the question is up at the top: evaluate the extent to which commercial development changed United States society from the 1800s to 1855. Now, what's particularly interesting with this type of an assignment is that there are actually 7 documents in which students need to evaluate and read, and there's various styles. So you'll notice one of them is a graphic, a visual. There are lots of visuals incorporated in APUSH. If you turn to the next one, and then these are the other 4 excerpts that students are supposed to read. So they need to read and synthesize all of this information before they go back and answer that question. Next one. And then the 4th style that I'm sharing with you is the long essay question. And if you'll notice up at the top of this, there's 5 bullets, and that's basically the rubric. It's the expectations of what they're supposed to address when they're writing. And then they have a choice of 3 different questions before. And earlier it was mentioned that part of this needs to be thematic when we were talking through the framework. You will notice if you read through each of the 3 questions that growth is the central theme that flows through all of those. In this question in particular, you would need to have the knowledge. You're not reading something and answering based on a document. You actually have to have this knowledge memorized in your head to be able to address this and write the complete essay regarding that. Questions? All right, choosing a textbook. So we evaluated 6 textbooks. So how this works for us is it's impossible for our teachers to be able to thoroughly go through every single one of those. So what they do is we order the textbooks, we give them all the actual text, they go through them, they do a look through it and decide which ones that they would like to do a deeper dive into. This has been our process in our district for as long as I've been told, because it's a very comprehensive process and it's very time consuming when you're dealing with textbook adoption, because meanwhile, our teachers are also teaching the course with the current textbooks that they have. So our teachers chose the 2 that are bolded up there. So Fabric of a Nation and Give Me Liberty are the 2 textbooks that our teachers did the deep dive into. And what that means is they looked through all the supplemental materials. There are all kinds of online resources, very comprehensive, different interactive things to create the tests and the assessments and all of those components as well, with this book as well. But we've just been focusing on the actual textbook. So you can go ahead. And our choice was Give Me Liberty. So what I'm going to do now is take you through the structures of this book, because that's what it comes down to for them, is that essentially because of the framework, any APUSH book is going to go through the same content because of the fact that that's what's on the test. And if kids' end goal is to pass this test in order to get college credit, then the texts are going to have that similarity as far as the content goes. So it was the structure in which our teachers really liked and embraced this book. So if you go. So the table of contents, it's built for the AP course. So you'll notice up at the top where it says period 3 and it says 1754 to 1800. That directly corresponds with that slide 8, which talked about the units, and it was unit 3 in the framework for the College Board. So you have this very easy to use document or book that absolutely crosses over and aligns with that. There's also AP style writing and test prompts that also mimic the actual test. So next one. One of the AP US History On the AP US History exam, students will encounter secondary sources and be expected to connect these sources to their own historical knowledge and understanding. This feature provides students with ample opportunities to practice analyzing secondary sources. You will notice this resembles what you saw on slide 10, which was the short answer question that dealt with the dueling historians again. So that was a sample from the exam is what I showed you on slide 10. This is an example from the textbook, and there are many of these throughout the textbook to give students the ability to practice the skills on the short answer question. This book is fully correlated with the AP US History curriculum framework. Not all textbooks are. The current textbooks that our teachers use is a college textbook, so it provides the content, but it's not aligned and neatly organized to reflect what AP is asking for. And as well as some of those others on the 6 that were identified, those are not necessarily all completely AP aligned. They provide the content, but you as a teacher would have to go through and pull the pieces and make it work together. Again, this is showing the direct alignment with the framework and the ease of use, the table of contents, how it addresses the critical reading strategies, the historical reasoning processes, the historical thinking skills, and then it deals with writing. Then the next one. Okay, this one, I'm an English teacher, so this was a wow to me because one of the most difficult things to do is to provide examples to students on writing. And this provides a student essay, and you will notice on the right-hand side, all of those boxes are critiques based on the rubric for where the student went right or wrong. So a student could pick up this book, read this essay, and see exactly what this is looking for. It's very difficult as a teacher to have exemplars, but not only the exemplars, but to have different levels of writing so that students can see what it looks like when things are wrong and how to fix them. So this is definitely a plus for the structure of this textbook. This shows you at the beginning of the chapter what it looks like. There are focus questions throughout each of the chapters. And if you'll notice well, you can't read that up there, but the top focus question says, what visions of freedom did the former slaves and slaveholders pursue in the post-war South? And if you'll go to the next one, if you look at the top of that page in that red bar on the right, that focus question is up there. So throughout the entire book, the focus questions are focused, and on the tops of all of the pages. So it's very easy for students to stay directed and know exactly what's on which page. You'll also notice in this particular textbook, it's very graphic with the pictures and the designs. That's a key component, as you saw, because there's lots of visuals on this exam. So it's providing not only the color photos there with the descriptors next to it, you have the text, and then you also have the other visual with the map there. That's also a key component. And you recognize that that's similar to what you looked on the DBQ. Voices of Freedom, this is a mini DBQ. So again, another way for students to practice what's going to be on the actual test. And this the DBQ that I referenced before was on slides 12 and 13. Who is an American? This was an attribute that they added to this book, and what it does is it provides some text and then it makes questions, and these are debatable, and that's the point of this section, is to inspire debate in the classroom so a teacher can cultivate that conversation. She was talking about perspectives, and so students could share their perspectives. Our AP teachers are very sophisticated in having classroom conversations to be able to address topics, because you have to be able to have those conversations, not only writing, but being able to speak and have that debate style in a classroom. And then we have the chapter review. You'll have review questions here, key terms, but then again, on the right-hand side, you'll notice there that again, it's mimicking test-like questions. So the short answer question practice, you'll notice there's a visual that all those questions are based on. And then it also has long essay questions for practice as well there. Okay, our rationale, the teacher's rationale for choosing this book. Ultimately, it provided the best supplemental sources and assessments for our students to be successful. Organization was solid and easily accessible for teachers and students. The book models the format of the APUSH exam questions so students may easily practice the exam. It's designed specifically for the APUSH classroom, unlike some of the other texts. And it is a respected textbook by many because it's currently used in over 600 schools nationwide. And that document was also posted on the board agenda, which lists all the schools in each state and which ones are using it. In addressing the original concerns, I know there were different ones brought up tonight, but APUSH, and this is what Murrieta mentioned, is that APUSH previous exams have only covered up to the early 2000s. So teachers don't even get to Trump and the presidencies at that end, because what they're doing is they're focusing on making sure that students are prepared for the exam. They took the exam 2 weeks ago, so it's even earlier in your school year. You lose the last month, so your timeline stops a lot sooner. Regardless of footnotes, or regarding footnotes, textbook companies typically do not use them anymore. If you can imagine, this is a thick enough book as it is. If we were adding footnotes, it would probably double or triple the size of it. So that's why our social studies books have gone away, as well as most of our other textbooks. Everything in the book can be backed up by various sources. And then finally, each book we assessed presented the accomplishments and the criticisms of every administration. If you think back to the framework requirements on slides 5 to 8 and the depth of the knowledge needed to address the sample questions shared in slides 10 through 14, you can see that presenting both sides is a necessity for success in this course. And then you're going to see me, you know I'm going to talk about this because this is my sweet spot. So in closing, I'd like to bring this conversation back to what I refer to as our district's true north, and that is our profile of a graduate. And the course and its relevance directly correlates with our academically ready descriptor. And you can see the characteristics on the right-hand side, which states that all students will read, write, and think critically, seek and apply knowledge, engage in appropriately challenging academic courses, meet state academic standards, and display creativity and innovation. Now questions.
I've been really fast, just because I'll forget. I really appreciate you because, first of all, just so impressed with your knowledge and your passion for what you're teaching. There are 4 teachers that teach this subject. You're the only one here.
Well, I did say I would be their tribute. So.
Okay. Well, And it's not like putting your, but I do know that what we just described has not been my child's experience with AP. And I know you do a good job with your kids. And that's why I wanted to make sure that we differentiate, and the community understands that. It comes down to the teacher and how they prepare our kids and how they present the material. So I only have one more question for you, and I'm going to let the rest of the world speak because I'm done. Well, I'll probably say something later, but AP resources, a lot of this is on the AP resources. They provide a lot to you. So how much do you rely on the book? Because I did talk to our AP teacher at my site and at other sites. And one of the things they said, we don't use the text that much, and the AP provides so much. The College Board provides stuff that they use, or they have their own materials. And so just out of curiosity, yeah, how reliant are you on that textbook?
Well, it's a trick question because our current textbook is almost 20 years old, and it is actually a real college level textbook. And so I actually have in my classroom half of my textbook that MSJC has used in the past. I don't know if they still use it though. And so we have had to rely on what the College Board has given us because we don't have any other resources because of our current textbook. And I will say the College Board isn't perfect. When they redesigned it in 2015, they threw it out to us. We're like, hey, good luck to ya. And that was a horrible pass rate year. And while they have given us material, it is still incredibly limited. And so that was our primary intent when the committee met 3 times, I think we met starting last school year to say what is our priority. And one is we just want a new textbook. That of course was the #1 priority. But secondly, we want a lot of supplemental material. We want stuff that aligns itself to Canvas, since we do use Canvas. We want to be able to maybe put up quick questions, quick assessments that we could see digitally. And that's what the Phoner book gives us, is a lot of the supplemental material. They also come up with their own review book made by Norton, which is their publishing company. And their review book is, I like it, I call it bare bones. It's thinner because it's just content specific test questions, short answer questions as a review. And so for us, we've been having to use outside stuff, and we're really hoping that the publishing company, we start using their resources.
And that was another thing. We talked about college. I know I'm a history major from UCSB. UCSB text didn't look anything like this. This looks a lot like just regular old history textbook to me from when I was a kid. So it was odd to hear, oh, this is very strenuous, which I'm worried about. The other one was I had another teacher suggest this. I noticed this was a second choice, and just curious of the differentiating between these two texts.
Well, I mean, and yeah, Fabric was our second. It does also have a lot of online materials. What we didn't like about Fabric, honestly, is visually, we need to think like a 16, 17-year-old student. Visually, it's not a fun book. And they go by modules, and it doesn't align to the periods that this aligns to. And so already when we were looking through Fabric, it was already confusing. But I mean, it's a good book. That's why we put it second. But in terms of aligning directly to period 1 through 9, they call it modules, and it is a thinner book, which means we would still have to fill in a lot of the blanks there, where Phoner goes more in depth on the certain subjects.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say I really appreciate what you're saying. I'm a teacher myself. I do understand how important all those supplemental materials are, and how much work teachers have to go to organize their lessons. It is not an 8-hour-a-day job, but anyway, I want to say I understand and appreciate, what you all deal with. And I think the book is, I spent a few hours reading through the materials last night. I was really impressed. I wish I would have had history. I love history myself. I wish I would have had history books structured more like that.
Well, and in college, I was also a history major.
Yeah.
None of our history books looked like that because
Right.
they were little books instead, right? In my master's, I'm deciding about getting a second master's. In master's class, it's 5 books written by 5 different historians. It's not a text book.
And they tend to be very dry.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think this, for high school students, if you can get away from the dry books, they'll be way more interested.
For sure.
Any other questions on the adoption portion?
This is it.
No, that was it.
This is it.
That's the end of the slides. Looks like it's you.
So I'm not sure, I can't remember, I'm sorry, what year you came, but apparently in the past, there was a process where the textbook adoptions were included a whole bunch of people, like, I don't know, 25 to 50 or whatever, including parents. And there was, this is from 1997, I think. Yeah, 1997. And there was a, these are the books up here. And then these are the rubrics by which they were assessed, rated. And so this definitely included parents. So what I'm seeing is happening here is the public was invited to look at the books after the teachers looked at them. And then there's one that they were not happy with. And so now we're in a position of suggesting another one. And then there was a commenter here today that wishes that there was even more time to look. So I just wanted to point that out. And then much of the presentation was about how well the book lines up with the AP. So I don't think anyone here has been questioning that, right? I mean, it's been about content, which that was mentioned on the APUSH course framework components. So anyway, there's the historical thinking skills and reasoning process, practice and develop, and then the course content. And so I think all of the objections had to do with content. So, and there's one other thing I wanted to mention. Okay, so, oh, in the objections, I'm sorry. So you addressed objections. The one that says everything written in Give Me Liberty can be backed up with an archived social media entry, debate transcript, or rally speech. So I think all the board members received an email today that addresses that. And so I just want to read that email real quick. I guess you guys may not have seen it. I don't know. This is, hopefully you guys will recognize it. Thank you for all that you do to support the Murrieta Valley School District. It's a tough job, but greatly appreciated. I wanted to add my comments to the topic for tonight's meetings as I will not be able to attend. As a proud Mexican-American public school teacher and administrator for over 30 years, I'm deeply concerned by the bias coming through our textbooks. I've highlighted just a few of the quotes from the AP history textbook for your consideration. So here's the first quote that this author addresses. As president, Trump kept up his rhetorical attacks on Mexicans. And then this person says, wasn't his emphasis on illegal immigration, not Mexicans? And then this person suggests this sentence could have been written in this manner to make it a more accurate statement. As president, Trump kept up his attacks on illegal immigration. Then the second quote that this author refers to, Trump repeatedly blamed undocumented immigrants for urban crime. And then her response to this is, this could have easily been a true statement had it included the word increase in urban crime, rather than giving the impression that undocumented immigrants are responsible for all urban crime. Her third quote that she refers to, young children, even toddlers, separated from their parents and held in cage-like structures. While this may be a true statement at face value, the inclusion of even toddlers and cage-like structures makes it appear as though the president is doing something awful and unprecedented. The fact is that the cage-like structures were built and used by the prior administration. The fact is that children may be separated from their parents for various reasons, including the inability to verify that the adults with them are actually their parents. And then lastly, this practice was in place with the prior administration and continues with the current administration. And then this author ends with, textbooks written from an objective viewpoint are becoming more difficult to find. We are responsible for giving our children the opportunity to think critically and come to their own conclusions about what they believe. Living in a free country where your vote and voice count cannot be taken for granted, If textbooks are filled with bias toward one viewpoint, we eliminate all objectivity. Please consider an alternative textbook or program to use for the AP history class. And then my last question would be based on, all we've talked about here, why was this book not in the top 2? It follows the AP framework. It has appealing pictures, maps. It has debating the past. It has patterns of popular culture. So why was this one not included in the top 2?
Me and the other 3 teachers, most of us, the 4 of us, are on a social media page of US history teachers. There's about 3,000 on it. And so I actually went to that page and I go to search, you want to be social media mannered. So I went to the search instead of posing the question. And I looked at every book that we had. I put it in the search and the Brinkley one came back as lackluster, like, it works, but the teachers weren't jazzed about it. The students weren't jazzed about it. And so just on a consensus of AP teachers around the country, that's why we actually rated Foner and then Fabric of a Nation second, based on what we saw looking at it initially, and then what we heard back as feedback of teachers who had been using these textbooks. Yeah, because we did need to narrow it down and do a deep dive into 2 of them, and those were the 2 that we had picked instead. So that's why honestly, I couldn't read all 6 while we're teaching AP.
Right. So there are quite a few teachers here who commented on it. I don't know if that makes a difference.
AP teachers, they teach AP US history?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I mean, if they do, I
You
would
can
love
take
the conversation.
do a show of hands, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would love the conversation because it's a tough class to teach. And so we just want new textbooks. And this was one that we rated. But also as a teacher in this digital age, I hope the board understands we do teach perspective, because if we didn't, I'd be on social media. I'd be on a TikTok, right? A parent would see a video and complain. So we are teaching perspectives where we don't have an agenda. I promise you, we really don't. If we did, my agenda would be all work in on time, show up to class prepared, bring me Chipotle. Yeah.
But the content things that people have brought up don't raise alarm
honestly,
bells for you?
Having read a lot of history books by historians, I mean, history is written with bias. And I teach also part of, the community's familiar. Mesa is the one school in the district that has AP Capstone, which is a 2-year commitment of a research class. I teach the juniors an AP seminar, and then as seniors, they do AP research. But I teach them how to research. I teach them how to form arguments and write argumentative papers. They have to make presentations for the College Board. And so teaching perspective and teaching that bias is there and is going to be everywhere, but we need to recognize the bias. That is a huge thing. If we want our students to truly think for themselves, I have to make sure they could recognize bias. Don't take everything you read verbatim.
Just seems like you want to have as a starting point a book that doesn't have bias for their young students. But anyway, I've talked enough. So
any other further questions? Because we just want to have them. They've been standing for quite some time.
Yes. I mean, yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
The question of them.
Yes.
You have a question?
I have several.
Okay.
Yes, it's true that has gotten about every award known to man over a 50-year career. But it seems to me when I went through the book and read a lot of the 900 gazillion pages, I did not have a good feeling about America when I finished that book. I didn't. Now, I was a design teacher, not a history teacher, but in looking, I think it's kind of interesting that, according to my limited research, he grew up in a New York family devoted to historical scholarship and left-wing politics. His father, Jack, and his uncle, Philip, both taught history at City College before they were dismissed and blacklisted as communists. Later on, Well, for the elder phoners, a radical approach to U.S. history involved placing the Black freedom struggle at center stage. And he claims that in the 30s, the Communist Party was the only predominantly white organization to make fighting racism central to its political program. The family was friendly with W.E.B. Du Bois and Paul Robinson. History by half notes. Foner has written a history textbook designed to indoctrinate college students into his own radically leftist political perspective. That's out of History News Network, Columbia University. He uses, in one published article, he uses the word tragedy to describe the failure of early 20th century Marxists to gain control of the US political system. Does that mean we should teach our students that Marxists should be running the country? He's very adept in this book at soothing language. It's sounds very balanced and reasonable. But when you read some of the specific things, he depicts American GIs who fought against communism in Vietnam as murderers and rapists. There might have been a few, really? Just blanket. He disparages the free enterprise system, Judeo-Christian values, and Western cultures in general. And I won't even go into the Mayflower Compact and that sort of thing. But what I'm saying is, a printed piece of material is very powerful. And when you open it up and you see that it's printed and it says that this is what is true, a lot of people kind of lose their perspective and subconsciously say, oh, yeah, okay, must be. It's hard for me as a person who's sworn to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I've done it over and over again. Done it over and over again. I did it when I joined the Navy. I did it when I became a teacher. I did it when I got fingerprinted for who knows how many things. No felonies, of course. But what I'm saying is, it's hard for me to accept that, because yes, he's got some good things there, but he's very adept at using language that sounds reasonable, but some of the things in the book are not reasonable. They're not what we believe in, at least what most of us believe in terms of the American way of life. I'm not saying that the American way of life is perfect. Never was, never will be. But it looks, from this book, it looks as though we're being slowly pushed to one side. You get a feeling for one side, and this is the only way to go. And I have a problem with that.
Do you have a question of them?
Sure.
President Diffley?
No,
Oh,
is there a question?
I will be happy to phrase it as a question.
Oh, okay.
Did the teachers who selected this know the specific background of the author when they chose the books?
We are all very familiar with Eric Foner. I'm pretty sure everyone who was a history major had to read Reconstruction in college. So yes, we're familiar with Foner in terms of his educational background, but his personal background of a historian, we're not.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I teach a high school survey course, Mr. Diffley. So I mean.
So I don't know if the author's personal background growing up was considered in part of a textbook selection process. I think to answer that question.
Well, okay, is it or is it not? Is the background, any of their backgrounds influence a decision in terms of the book? Any book that was selected?
Not quite sure your question.
Sure, go ahead, jump in.
I think in light of what he said, and I think one of the last comments was, we really want to be able to identify bias with students. So the teacher, would you be a little disturbed by the information he just presented to you?
In his youth, I would hope that people understand people can change. I mean, someone brought up I Love Lucy and Lucille Ball, and she was a registered communist in the 1920s. But she's beloved in entertainment industry. So I'm just not sure, again, as someone who majored in history, I'm not looking at their childhood upbringing. I'm looking at their credentials as a historian. And in this textbook, when you read the textbook, and I've read most of this textbook, you don't see that bias, I suppose, if that's what you're asking.
I have a question about that. So with I Love Lucy, so I guess you're saying she was a communist.
No, she just had registered as a communist party.
She had
Actually
registered
didn't
as a
vote, she
communist.
said.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she registered as a communist and she was a beloved TV personality. So isn't that different from being a communist and then teaching history in United States schools?
I guess I'm a little concerned about this becoming a debate. I'm not comfortable
It
with
seems like
that.
it's almost getting a little personal.
All right, I would,
Yeah.
Mr. Diffley, I would like to make a motion. I would like to make a motion to approve this AP edition of American History Connecting with the Past, a McGraw-Hill book, which is on the California approved list of AP US history books.
Not on the agenda.
So can we pause for just a minute, please? Because
We
we have a
can.
point of order.
We can.
Are there any more questions specific about the process? Because we don't need to debate history with our instructors and our staff. That's not what we need to do. So if there's still further questions, then I would, can we dismiss them to be seated?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Mrs. Vandergrift, just a point of order, I want to share what we have agendized and what's on the agenda. There is not an agenda item to adopt a different text. The one that's presented to the board, because it's a carryover from the original agenda item, was to adopt this particular book that's been presented, as was before. And so if the board chooses to not adopt this book as presented, and that will be just come down to the vote, staff, we would have, what would occur for us is the board members may make a recommendation to staff, which is to me, of other potential topics of consideration. We would go back with our team and reconsider those and evaluate the other books that are available online. I mean, it would probably take a few months. I would assume it would take some time to get through a repeat process that we've done. And there's a different question about, around involvement from the community or parents in curriculum adoption, which is somewhat of a separate question than this particular book. So it would take some time to come back. In the interim, our teachers would continue on with the older version that you have and pulling the resources as you have been doing splendidly given the circumstances. And so we thank you for that effort. So by point of order, we wouldn't be able to just switch and adopt. The staff would really need to do their job.
So I'm pretty sure that members of the public and President Diffley can put things on the agenda. They have that right according to California Ed Code. So
yes,
yeah.
they do.
Yeah, so why do we have to wait several months? I mean, I thought everyone was in a huge hurry to get these books by next year.
When we had, so the particular question is, yes, we approved those for next year. This is one that we would have liked to have done, but we recognize there's a process in place. And so we could agendize this again, but in all fairness to those who have to teach the material, they should have an opportunity to examine and review its viability in terms of instructional material and its alignment to the test, and then give their input back to the board.
Sad that we wasted this much time, I would say, by not anticipating this possibility.
I'd just like to speak. I always want to speak, but I'm going to try to make this short. I'm disappointed with the process. I know Dr. Anderson and I spoke about this yesterday. I was exceedingly disappointed that I asked for the copies of these textbooks and I received them last night. That's not okay. And if the community wants to have input, they need to have access to these books. It is absolutely atrocious that we've waited 20 years to get the kids. I'm devastated at this because my heart goes to you because I know you're passionate about what you're doing. I can tell. And I do want to, this is very inflammatory, the parts that I did read. And I did try to take the time to read the other textbook, which was your second choice, to try to see what the materials were, what the differences were between the two texts. And this book does come off extremely inflammatory. In fact, how he describes Christianity and the Reconstruction period and the soldiers and how they cope with grief. That Christianity is just a coping mechanism. Spoken like an atheist, it was really bad. And furthermore, that white supremacy was the reason why Reconstruction ended. I know that's a simplification of the whole process, but that was his overarching theme. There's a lot of inflammatory language throughout. And every time I hit a point within this textbook, you could see the bias was oozing out of this. And so that's why I'm really concerned that this was chosen to begin with. And then I'm even more concerned about the process. And we need to make sure that our processes are better in the future, for sure. I absolutely want our students to have resources, and I do feel like the teachers, and I even spoke about this yesterday. I'm disappointed that we have 4 teachers teaching this subject and only 1 teacher is here to present the case for this one particular textbook. So I think we've got to be able to do better. And this has been a failure in this regard. And we should be able to identify too the community we're teaching. If you read this, you understand our community. Like I said, we have a strong military community here. They care about how our history is portrayed. They care about how their students are being taught about American history. They should not have the feeling when they get done reading this textbook that America is a terrible place. That should not happen. It shouldn't happen to any of our kids. And furthermore, if we're relying on teachers, that there is polling teachers right now, and we talked about this a little bit. There is a split in our society right now, and the trust is really getting broken. No one likes me saying this, but it is broken. And we have to find ways as a community to mend it, and as teachers in particular, to step forward and help mend this. Because when I walked, it was the community members were concerned about what their kids were being taught. I just had an episode literally last night with my daughter talking about what happened in her history class. And the way in which there's so much pressure. If you're a conservative in Murrieta, think about this, a conservative town, you are pressured like nobody's business to shut your mouth and you just sit right there and listen to us spew all this liberal garbage. And I don't think that's right. We should have a school that allows people to be able to voice their opinions and not be terrified of the cancel culture, not to be terrified of how they're going to be portrayed outside. That shouldn't happen. We should be able to be in a safe space, regardless of what we think about how history is being presented. History is history. We want to teach all of it. I will note also, as we have people walking out, storming out, that there isn't one time they mentioned Madam C.J. Walker. Bass Reeves is not included, one of the greatest lawmen we have, not mentioned. Minorities are underrepresented in these textbooks. Every single one of them, trust me, because I studied communism. The communists want to make sure that our minority groups were underrepresented, and the only thing that they'd be able to focus on when they study history is all the horrible things that the Democratic Party did to African Americans throughout our history. And it's a travesty that that's what these textbooks continue to push over and over again, spewing hatred, trying to create division within our communities. It's awful. And that's what I have to say about the book.
I have a question for you, Dr. What's the drop dead date on ordering books?
On ordering books, Faith, do you know a time frame? I mean, we're towards the end of the year.
It's pretty immediate. I mean, books need to be, I think the other books have been placed or they're in the process of being going, and that's to get here just in time for school start. So it's a tight deadline.
Is it that if we don't order it now, we won't get it at all next year, or we'll just get it?
But we can order them
in
anytime.
October
It's just
or
that, you know,
November,
of
or-
course, we prefer to have them and teachers can get used to using them and
see.
that kind of thing. We can order them at any time. I'm sorry if
Yeah.
I wasn't clear on that.
Correct. And they can come and teachers would switch mid-year.
Yeah,
start to swap out
absolutely. I mean,
material.
if that's what we're looking at in terms of options, I'm sure they would prefer to have something throughout the year rather than nothing. I guess I'm saying we won't have something, we're not likely to get something for the start of the year with the process that we're working through.
I guess I'd like to just respond to one thing. You know, we hear over and over again in here that we should be able to have differing viewpoints, and I absolutely believe that. And Mr. Pardue, I will share with you that I have had 2 children go through this school district, and one is still in high school here. And my children and my family have had exactly the opposite experience, where my children have come home feeling incredibly shut down by the more conservative teachers that they've had. So, and I'm not saying you are wrong or I am right. I'm not saying that, but that has been our experience. So I think the division is real, and I think our sensitivities are real. And I really thank everybody for coming in here tonight to share and the amount of work that I saw demonstrated here going into reading the books and familiarizing yourself with the books to make an opinion of your own. And I appreciate that, frankly.
Yeah.
And I do hope that we all can remember that while my experience is one thing, there are people having other experiences, and neither one of those experiences is wrong. They're just different. And can't we come together? Folks, can't we come together? That's my plea. It has nothing to do with this textbook. It's nothing to do with proving it or disproving it or what textbook we use. We just, you guys. we gotta
Well,
come
let me
together.
just say that.
I'm done.
Are you done? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
I'm used to it.
What happened here tonight should have been done a while back. Should have been done a while back with a lot more, and this is not your fault. I don't want you, either one of you or any of the teachers out here to go home and say, gee, I feel terrible because Diffley thought I was a jerk. I don't. I love my teachers, but I think the process could have started earlier and been more open, and that's something we need to work on.
Mr. Diffley, I would like to speak to that because you and I have spoken about this, and that our board policy does need to be reviewed, and because it does not provide mechanisms right now. And we have to go according to board policy. We can't be in violation of board policy or we're hypocrites. And I have been asking for a review of the board policies around curriculum adoption since I got on the board, because my entire reason for being on the board was parent engagement and listening to parents and hearing what they have to say. And for various reasons, and I think the pandemic was a big one, my pleas for this just didn't go anywhere. And maybe that was because I didn't put my foot down and say, we're doing it. So Mr. Diffley, are we doing it?
We better.
We need to review the board policy
We need to review it.
to provide mechanisms for better community input before it gets this far.
How soon? Well, that's something we could work out, maybe in a special session.
So, Mr. Diffley, we have a board meeting next week, and you and I can consult afterwards, after this meeting, about agendizing that review of that policy as soon as next week.
Excellent. Good, okay. Where are we at now?
It's a call for motion on this particular adoption.
Okay, for this particular adoption, B1, I'm calling for a motion and a second to approve the proposed new AP US History curriculum.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to do this by person because I think there's a split. Okay. Mrs. Lunn?
Aye.
Aye, sorry. Aye or nay? Aye.
Yes.
Mr. Pardue?
Nay.
Mrs. Vandergrift,
Nay.
Ms. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Dibley, nay. And no, I don't belong to any of the churches that were mentioned. Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and the motion dies. B2, approval to increase the expenditure for instructional materials for grades 6 through 12. This is a great one. Call for a motion and a second to increase the expenditure for instruction materials.
So moved.
Been
Second.
moved by Mrs. Vandergrift,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Young. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. Call for adjournment. That's I have a motion.
So moved.
So moved. I have a second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any comments? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Pass.